You walk into a therapist's office expecting to get better. You expect tissues, soothing tones, breathing techniques. You don't expect to walk out with blood on your hands. That's exactly what happened in a quiet Los Angeles suburb in 2019, and no one saw it coming. Dr. Helen Marsh wasn't just a therapist. She was a brand. She had a best-selling book called Rewire Your Pain. She'd been featured on daytime talk shows, was a guest expert on true crime podcasts, and had over 300,000 followers on Instagram where she posted affirmations with a smile that could melt walls. To the world, she was a visionary healer. To her clients, she was salvation. But behind that serene voice and polished smile, there was something else. Something off. Something people couldn't quite explain. And to a select few who sat across from her couch, that something would become the most dangerous influence in their lives. Her downfall started with one woman, Sarah Quinlan. Sarah was 34, fragile, anxious, recently divorced from an emotionally abusive husband who had left her drained of confidence, money, and purpose. Her therapist had retired. A friend suggested Dr. Marsh. She works miracles, they said. Sarah booked a session. From the first meeting, Marsh was magnetic. She didn't just listen, she leaned in. Her tone was calm but commanding. She never said, "I don't know." She always had an answer, and that made Sarah feel safe. But then things took a turn. Instead of gently encouraging Sarah to process her past, Marsh fixated on her pain. Sessions became angrier, darker. "You're not just a victim," Marsh would say. "You're a survivor. But surviving isn't enough." Sarah started to change. Her friends noticed it. She was more intense, paranoid, constantly talking about her ex-husband, Kyle, and the things he might do. She wasn't sleeping. She said things like, "If he shows up, I'll be ready." One night, she confided something disturbing to a friend. "I had a dream I stabbed him," she whispered. "And I told Dr. Marsh, and she said maybe it wasn't just a dream. Maybe it was my subconscious showing me a path forward." That same week, Sarah bought a hunting knife on Amazon. It was only $27. She didn't even open the box at first, just left it under her bed. But the thoughts wouldn't stop. What if Kyle did come back? What if he tried to hurt her again? Dr. Marsh had said over and over, "The system doesn't protect people like you. Sometimes you have to protect yourself." Then Marsh began using a phrase that would later show up in court transcripts. What would it look like to be free? That question echoed in Sarah's mind for weeks. And then, she snapped. On July 14, 2019, just after midnight, Sarah showed up outside Kyle's apartment. She hadn't seen him in 6 months. In her mind, she told herself she just wanted to talk, to get closure. But the knife was in her bag. Her hand kept brushing it like it was breathing. Kyle opened the door, confused, groggy. That's when everything unraveled. They argued. He tried to shut the door. She shoved it open. She pulled out the knife. But she hesitated. Her hands shook. And Kyle? He didn't fight back. He stared at her in horror and said just 4 words. "Sarah, what's happening?" It was like a mirror shattered. Sarah dropped the knife and collapsed. Kyle called 911. She was arrested on the spot, charged with attempted assault with a deadly weapon. But when police began to dig through Sarah's phone, they found something deeply disturbing. Dozens of messages to Dr. Marsh, voice notes, late-night confessions, even photos of the knife. And Dr. Marsh? She had replied. One message read, "When fear becomes too heavy, sometimes action is the only release." Another, "You already know what needs to be done. You just haven't given yourself permission yet." When detectives questioned Dr. Marsh, she said it was all a therapeutic exercise. Visualization, she claimed. Role play for emotional release. But the tone of the messages said otherwise. She wasn't treating Sarah's trauma, she was feeding it. And Sarah wasn't her only patient, because just 4 months later, another client would emerge. A young man named Chloe Jackson. Yes, Chloe was his real name. He was 26, gender non-conforming, and had been seeing Marsh for anxiety and unresolved trauma from growing up in a religious cult. But unlike Sarah, Chloe had no ex to fear, no abuser to confront. His target was a complete stranger. And once again, the name Dr. Helen Marsh appeared in the case file. Only this time, someone actually died. When news broke about Sarah Quinlan's attempted stabbing of her ex-husband, most people thought it was just another domestic spiral, a tragic breakdown. Another person pushed too far. Chloe was 26, sensitive, artistic, and painfully anxious. He'd grown up in a fringe religious cult in Nevada, where any form of questioning was met with violent punishment. He'd escaped the group at 19 but never fully escaped the trauma. His days were filled with panic attacks and nightmares. He barely left the house. He found Dr. Helen Marsh on Instagram. Her aesthetic was polished, warm, and therapeutic. She posted clips about breaking trauma cycles and becoming your own protector. She felt safe, trustworthy, smart. He booked a virtual session. It was supposed to be for anxiety. But just like with Sarah, Dr. Marsh took Chloe somewhere darker. Their first meetings were standard, grounding exercises, EMDR therapy, trauma mapping. But Marsh quickly began encouraging Chloe to explore something she called vengeance processing. It sounded clinical, scientific. It wasn't. Chloe told her about the cult's leader, a man named Daniel Graves. Graves had led a rural commune called the Path of Light that operated like a twisted hybrid of Christianity and totalitarianism. Chloe had seen children beaten, women locked away, and boys, like himself, subjected to discipline rituals that were too horrific to say out loud. Dr. Marsh listened, and then said something that would stick in Chloe's mind like a virus. Some abusers can only be stopped if someone's brave enough to do it. From that moment on, Chloe became obsessed with the idea of confronting Daniel Graves. Dr. Marsh began subtly feeding that obsession. She encouraged Chloe to write letters to Graves. Letters that described, in graphic detail, what Chloe would do to him if they ever met again. Part of your healing, she said, is reclaiming the power he stole. At first it worked. Chloe said he felt stronger. But then the letters turned to fantasies. Then blueprints. Then plans. By late February, Chloe had purchased a bus ticket to Nevada. He told Marsh he was going to reclaim closure. Her reply: "You deserve justice. I won't stop you." On March 3, 2020, Chloe arrived at the compound outside Carson City. Daniel Graves was still there. Older, slower, but still revered by the loyal few who remained. Chloe waited until dusk. He broke in through a basement window, found Graves sleeping in a small room tucked behind a chapel, and he attacked. Police reports say Chloe used a rusted hammer he found on the property. One blow, then another, 15 in total. Graves died on the spot. By the time police arrived, alerted by a frantic call from another member, Chloe was standing over the body, sobbing. He didn't resist arrest. He didn't even try to run. In the interrogation room, Chloe said one thing over and over: "Dr. Marsh told me I had to finish the process." That sentence chilled the detectives. Finish the process? They pulled Chloe's phone. It was filled with messages to Marsh. "I'm scared. What if I actually do it? He deserves to die for what he did, right? Will I feel peace after?" And Marsh's replies? "You're not a killer. You're a survivor finishing your story. There is no justice without action. If this is what you need to reclaim your soul, I support you." Now detectives were paying attention. 2 clients, 2 acts of violence, 2 phones filled with voice notes, therapy transcripts, and messages from the same therapist. But legally, it was murky. Dr. Marsh hadn't explicitly told anyone to commit murder. She didn't hand over a weapon. She didn't plot an attack. But her influence was undeniable. She wasn't just guiding fragile people. She was weaponizing them. Detective Marcus Heller brought in a forensic psychologist named Dr. Leanne Stroud to review the cases. Her conclusion? This is calculated coercion cloaked in therapy. She exploited clients' vulnerabilities and reframed vengeance as healing. It's psychological manipulation at a surgical level. Dr. Stroud even went a step further. Marsh's methods mirror those used by cult leaders. Isolation, gaslighting, emotional dependency, reframing violence as liberation. They had enough to open a criminal investigation into Marsh. The DA approved charges of criminal negligence, professional misconduct, and conspiracy to incite violence. The media ate it up. Headlines exploded. Therapist or puppet master? The woman who made murder sound like healing. 2 clients, 1 therapist, a trail of blood. When Marsh was finally arrested outside her upscale office in Brentwood, she said nothing. She didn't cry, didn't argue. She just looked at the officers and said calmly, "I was trying to help them." Her arrest rocked the mental health world. Half of her colleagues called her a monster. The other half weren't so sure. Because here's the terrifying part. Everything she said could be interpreted as metaphor. She never said, "Kill him." She never said, "Stab your ex." She framed it as healing, closure, power. And for a while it worked, until it didn't. The courtroom was packed. Journalists lined the front row. Former clients sat behind them, some teary-eyed, others expressionless. Everyone came for one reason: to watch Dr. Helen Marsh, the celebrated therapist turned alleged puppet master, finally face justice. She walked in wearing a tailored navy suit. No makeup, no jewelry, no emotion. Just a cold, calm stare that never left the judge's bench. She wasn't charged with murder. There was no direct evidence she told anyone to kill. But the prosecution had found a different strategy: conspiracy to incite violence, professional abuse, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. And they had 2 star witnesses. Sarah Quinlan sat stiffly in the witness box. Her voice shook, but she spoke clearly. She told the jury how her weekly sessions with Marsh had twisted her thinking, how she went from healing her trauma to planning her ex-husband's death, and how Dr. Marsh never stopped her. "She told me I was still in danger," Sarah said. "That violence was a way to finally close the loop. That I'd never be free until I faced him on my terms." The defense tried to paint Sarah as mentally unstable. But then the prosecution played the recordings. Unbeknownst to Marsh, Sarah had recorded some of their final sessions on her phone. At the time she said, something didn't feel right. In one clip, Marsh's voice is low and controlled. "You've been hurt for too long. When justice fails, you don't have to." In another, "There are acts that look like violence, but are actually freedom. Can you see the difference, Sarah?" The courtroom was silent. One juror visibly flinched. Chloe Jackson testified next. He wore an orange jumpsuit, still awaiting his own sentencing. But the prosecution offered him a deal in exchange for his full testimony. He told the jury everything. How Dr. Marsh pushed him to explore vengeance fantasies. How she reframed murder as catharsis. And how, even after he killed someone, she messaged him from a burner number. "I'm proud of you for reclaiming your story. I hope you find peace." Gasps echoed through the courtroom. The defense immediately objected, but the damage was done. Marsh's lawyers fought hard. They argued that therapy often involves metaphor and symbolic language, that her clients were unstable long before meeting her, that Marsh never directly instructed anyone to harm anyone else. They even brought in expert therapists to testify that phrases like reclaim your power and close the loop are common therapeutic language. But the prosecution wasn't done, because there was one more bombshell. A woman named Tasha Neal came forward during the trial. She had seen Marsh for grief counseling 2 years earlier. Her story didn't involve violence, but something else. Tasha was grieving the death of her sister from a hit-and-run accident. The case was unsolved. Marsh allegedly told her, "Sometimes we have to deliver justice ourselves. Closure doesn't come through courts. It comes through confrontation." Tasha said she never acted on it, but the idea haunted her. She ended therapy 3 sessions later, deeply disturbed. This testimony was the nail in the coffin. It established a pattern. Not just a one-time mistake, but a method. After 3 weeks of arguments, the jury deliberated for 5 hours. When they returned, the air was electric. Guilty. On all charges. Conspiracy to incite violence. Criminal negligence. Malicious therapeutic malpractice. Marsh didn't blink. The judge sentenced her to 22 years in prison with no possibility of parole for the first 15. As he read the sentence, he said, "You weren't a healer. You were a conductor of chaos. You treated therapy like a weapon. And your clients became the bullets." Sarah Quinlan was sentenced to 1 year of house arrest and 5 years probation. She's now in trauma recovery therapy with a new court-appointed provider. She says she still hears Marsh's voice in her dreams. Chloe Jackson received 18 years for second-degree murder but is eligible for parole after 10. His family has since released a public statement condemning Marsh's influence and asking for mental health reform. Dr. Helen Marsh is currently housed at the California Institution for Women. She has reportedly begun writing a book titled, "The Mirror, What We Don't See in Ourselves." Yes, she's still trying to be the voice of healing. Here's the terrifying part. On the surface, Dr. Marsh never seemed dangerous. She wasn't a cult leader or a killer or a sadist. She didn't carry a weapon. She never raised her voice. She used empathy as a scalpel, therapy as a disguise, and language, the soft kind, to push broken people toward unthinkable choices. It raises the question, how many other professionals, people we trust, might be doing the same thing and getting away with it? Because when a therapist becomes the villain, who do you turn to for help? The True Crime Diary. Subscribe for more haunting stories from the darkest corners of the internet.